Jonas, dude, I'm super excited to, one, actually get to meet you in person.
Yeah.
You're actually much taller than I expected.
This is what happens. Yeah. This is what happens in the Zoom world.
But what I'm really excited about is we've been making a really big focus this year my goal is to interview 100 previous either customers or just other folks like in tech, sales, leadership, enablement, et cetera, like in person. So you're like the second one that I've done this year.
Love it.
So I got one under my belt, dude.
No pressure. I'll take it. And I want to say, thanks for including enablement. Oftentimes, sometimes we're forgotten, but love the opportunity to be chatting about the business here.
Absolutely. So I thought we would start with a little bit of background. I know you spent, was it 2009, I think was your first like tech sales job, at least. You were an AE at that company, a manager, a head of sales. What made you decide to shift into enablement at that point? Were you starting to lose some of all that thick hair that you got? Or what's
It was true startup, like starting in a basement experience.
Yeah.
First sales job, literally the best job you could ever have, like coming out of college. Like would not change a thing about that. Absolutely loved it. The general story there was, we went through a round of VC funding. I worked my way up through the company. We were about a 25 person sales team.
Yeah.
And then my marching orders were to scale that from 25 people up to like 150.
In 1 year?
In like a year and a half. Yeah. Massive scale.
Yeah.
All of it put into go-to-market. And our demographic that we were hiring for was a very transactional sale. We were hiring folks right out of college, no sales experience whatsoever, mold them into sellers, get them on the phones a month in, get them bringing in revenue.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, my entire job as head of sales through that scale up period, did that for like 3.5 years. It was absolutely insane. But I probably spent 75% of my time figuring out how to onboard and train and get people with no sales experience actually effective as quickly as possible.
Did you have enablement support to do that? Or was
No,
that
this was like pre-enablement. I don't even know if enablement was a word. If it was a word back then, it was primarily called like training. And we'd bring in some like flashy outside trainer.
Yeah.
But then there was like, no, it's just on me and the leaders. And that was it. And, at the end of doing that for 3.5 years, definitely had some kind of like early graying hair, but had the opportunity to figure out what was next after we had kind of an exit in that company. And had the opportunity to jump over to LogMeIn, which was like much more established company. They'd just gone public, but they had no enablement presence at all. And the marching orders there were kind of like come in and like figure out what enablement was, figure out how we could kind of like drive a lot more productivity into, a couple $100 million business and kind of like build out that function. And the more I thought about it, like that was kind of the part of the job that I enjoy doing most. I loved being head of sales, but like really loved seeing people develop, get better at their job, like get their first win, kind of make additional money. So like when there was the opportunity to shift into that exclusively, kind of jumped on that and been on that ride ever since.
So could you take us back quickly to that time? And what I'm wondering is if enablement wasn't really a thing that was talked about at that time, when you went in, did you have any kind of framework of what you would want to do? Or was it a lot of like, let me get online and figure out what the hell to do? Like, how did you know what to do?
It was Wild West. It was total Wild West. There was a lot of figuring it out. I remember there was a big argument at the time whether enablement should live within product marketing or within sales. Like that was the like conversation in like 2012 about enablement. The way I see the maturity of it is I think primarily enablement started off as in-housing training as a function.
Yep.
Where you'd have a lot of companies, we were working with Sandler, you'd be working with Command of the Message, whoever it might be, and you have $500,000, $1 million a year contracts, bringing them in to do their new hire training. And then you're like, all right, well, what was next? And there was no one really in-house to do the long tail reinforcement or to even take that training off the plate and kind of just in-house the whole thing. So for me, that's kind of where enablement started. It was like all of the sales training. It was kind of like building in-house methodology and delivering that to all the different segments. But it's definitely evolved a ton since then. And I think a lot of the, if I had to go back in time and kind of like coach my earlier self, like I think too much focus is put on just like the episode of doing a training versus all the other activities that enablement should be doing that actually drive impact back to the business there.
Yeah, I mean, it feels so good to run a training, right?
Yeah.
It's like we delivered this content. We did the thing. People were so excited about it. The reps loved it. We got good survey scores.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're kind of like, there is an element to that. You want to be front of room. You want to be like actually like giving people new ideas. I love training. Like you'd have to kind of like rip me away from like getting in front of people. But the more I've kind of moved up into leadership within enablement, obviously the more it's like you're letting other people do that. You're like needing to like hone those skills in other folks. And also one of the things that I'm pushing on and like constantly like drum beating to the team is the end all be all is not the training. Like that is not
Yep.
that is not the destination. That is not the goal line. And then you say like, all right, we did it, like game over. It's really like all the things that need to happen in between or after the training that like
Yep.
actually have impact.
One part of the recipe, which we're going to spend a ton of the time today digging into that framework.
Yeah.
How do you end up at Rippling, which is how we got connected, I think, in 2023.
Yeah.
How do you end up at Rippling? And then do you want to talk about, I think we were talking yesterday, I think the department has tripled in size
Yes.
since we talked last. So how do you end up at Rippling, and kind of catch us up? What's been going on at Rippling? What's the department looking like? All that good stuff.
Yeah. Let me give you the quick rundown there. So I was head of enablement at a company that was doing really well. We were kind of like riding through the pandemic, no complaints, totally happy, not looking to make a move at all.
Yeah.
Rippling wasn't on my radar, and they one day reached out about kind of taking over the enablement function. And the more I dug in and started learning about the company, the more I was like, holy crap, this is a opportunity that I absolutely cannot pass up.
Freaking rocket ship, dude.
Complete rocket ship. The overall just like product market fit, the opportunity out ahead of us is absolutely massive. And I've seen that play out over the last 3 years where, you know, we were covering a sales team of about 350 or 400 people when I started 3 years ago. That team's 1,800 right now. It's going to be 2,200 by the end of next year. It's like, it's absolutely massive. But yeah, I've been doing enablement for probably 12 years now. This is probably the first time where I was like, you know what, if I was ever going to go back into sales or sales leadership, it would be at Rippling, because the product is just like, it kicks that much butt.
It's freaking good, dude.
Can I swear on this, by the way? Or is
You
it
could say fuck, you could say shit, whatever you want to say.
It absolutely kicks ass. Yeah, it is very seller friendly. It is such an awesome product. So, So I had to take that opportunity. Gave you a little bit on the high level numbers there. And for people who don't know, Rippling really is kind of like a workforce operating system. So we automate all of the back end work where folks within HR or finance or IT, whether it's running payroll, benefits administration, you know, there's usually hosts of people staffed just to run all of these back end systems.
Yep.
And Rippling really is the one single platform that automates that for companies and really kind of like unlocks those roles to do much higher value work there.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great solution. And your org now is what? You have 30, you're about to have 36?
Yes,
folks on your
we
team, I
are
think,
hiring,
now.
by the way, if you're out there in the enablement space. But
Yep.
yeah, we are 33 today. We'll end the year at 36. And we've generally, I mean, when I started, we were a team of 7. So we've similarly scaled out the
Crazy.
team to meet the demand, let's say, of the business as it's been scaling up.
So let's get into kind of the framework and start to unpack a bit of how you kind of run things and how your team runs things. The reason why I wanted to talk with you is, you know, you're one of our like standout clients that we've had on the enablement side, where it was very obvious that, like, I think you did such a good job and do such a good job of like partnering with the sales team. Like, you have those relationships and like your department has the respect from the sales team, and that's not the case in like 90% of the companies that we see. And the team has just grown so much. So the framework, I'm really curious if we start with the first part. So we're going to go through 5 parts. One, like, I'm curious how you prioritize and like think about what to focus on.
Yep.
We'll talk about training a little bit and your hot takes there.
Yep.
We'll talk about measurement, practice, and then reinforcement. So if we start with prioritization, how do you guys, God, with, what did you say, 1,800 reps, 33 people on your team.
Yep.
I imagine you get a lot of things thrown your way from the sales org that's like, we need this and we need this, and there's dozens of things on that list. How do you sort of manage that dynamic, and how do you guys prioritize like what will be most important? Because every enablement team that I speak to is just like overloaded with stuff that they can just not keep up with.
Yeah. I think the starting place is kind of the non-negotiable. Sometimes the business is just going to dictate what you're doing. So examples of that, we're hiring 700 people this year. We obviously have to spend an inordinate amount of time onboarding and making sure they're ready to go.
Yep.
We also are constantly releasing new products. So you have like a tier 1 product release. Everything else is going to need to drop. You're going to need to roll that out. That's kind of like a business dictated priority.
Yep.
Where I think enablement oftentimes needs the most help is prioritizing all of, let's call it like the everboarding or ongoing optimization that isn't one of those like company dictated moments in time.
Yeah.
Where you're covering the SDR team when we started working together, you're covering the AE team, and you really need to go in there, dig in, and understand what the funnel math, the numbers are telling you, such that you can go and work with sales leadership. So you can say on a quarterly basis, like, hey, what are you seeing as the key priorities for Q1, Q2? If we could do one thing, if we could change one metric or kind of like enable one change within the org in this quarter, because there's only so much you can really change on, a base of hundreds of people, what would that be? And like, let's really try to put our muscle behind that. I think, the inverse of that is like, hey, let's just run a training every week on different topics and hope something sticks. And at the end of the quarter, we'll say we did a ton of stuff, but you're like, what was the metric we impacted? Like nothing. So, I like to take the reverse of like really trying to figure out what is the 1 to 2 outcomes that you would love to have driven at the end of a quarter or 2 quarter time period. And then really putting a lot of the organizational muscle behind that, knowing that there's really like only so much you can do and you really need to prioritize on the most important things there.
So tactically speaking, is this a conversation that like one of your program managers or you is having like at the very senior level, and then a program manager maybe with the director of that vertical? Like how tactically is that? How is that conversation happening? I guess?
I'll give you an example there. So I'm usually having that at the SVP level where I'll have that conversation with the head of all kind of new logo sales, basically our AE group.
Yep.
And then that person has 4 or 5 sales VPs covering each of their different segments.
Yep.
Each segment's about like 50 to 75 people. And the enablement PM is partnering with that VP to figure out what that roadmap is. Usually that way that looks is there's a point in time kind of like blocked off area for training every couple of weeks. We don't always use it, but at least it's like a placeholder. And they're figuring out what the 1 to 2 priorities for the month or their quarter are to really like leverage that time. And then I'm kind of usually doing it at an altitude higher at the kind of SVP level for the entire org.
So with that VP, how much of the dialogue is them just saying, hey, here are our priorities, here's what we need you to do, versus like, you mentioned data. Like, are you coming to the table at all and saying, hey, I noticed this thing. Have you noticed that, hey, most of our deals we know need 6 stakeholders, let's say, and we noticed that multi-threading is a big challenge right now. Or our AEs need to self-source 30% of pipeline and it's sitting at 20% right now. Are you coming to the table with some of those suggestions?
I think, so 100% yes, short answer to your question. I think this is one of the fail modes or the potential fail modes of enablement, where if you are covering a team and you're just sitting back waiting for direction from whatever that sales leader is to go and build the thing and deliver it and not proactively surfacing insights and not really being a true thought partner, eventually you're going to get to a point where that VP of sales is like, look, I have a very busy job. I have to work with all my sales managers. I'm bringing in deals. Like, I also can't dictate the roadmap for enablement as well. And at that point, you end up being more of a drag rather than a lever to increase performance. So at the very minimum, it should be a 50-50 collaboration. I'm never going to say you're going to get to the point where enablement is 100% dictating the roadmap. That shouldn't happen. But what you should be doing are things like, hey, I was looking at the numbers. I noticed some issues with our stage-to-stage conversion from S2 to S3.
Yep.
What do you think that is? Well, I just listened to 15 gong calls, and it seems like reps aren't doing a really good job setting kind of like next meetings at the end of a call. Yep. Maybe we should do a refresher on that. And that's just so much more powerful than saying like, hey, it's Q1. Like, what's top of mind for you and the team? What do you want us to train on?
It's kind of like showing up to a sales call unprepared and asking the same thing. It's like
so much so.
What I wrote down was like, you want to be a partner versus an order taker.
100%. Same thing on a sales call. You show up for your first discovery call and you ask the question, what are your priorities for the year? Like instant loss of credibility for that seller versus saying, hey, I've done my research. I see that you're doing A, B, C, and D. I imagine for you, that means that you're probably focused on like these 3 core things. Am I in the right ballpark? And yeah, it's the exact same thing with enablement. You're going to lose credibility if you don't have a really strong pulse on what's going on in the business. And I think one of the biggest opportunities for those program managers who are partnered with the VP of sales is to really like shine a light in all the like nooks and crannies of the business that someone at that altitude might not have line of sight into, and really saying like, hey, I just chatted with like your 3 best reps. Like, we're having problems with this. Or I listened to 15 gong calls. Like, we're absolutely getting murdered by this competitor when they bring up this trap setting question. And it's like oftentimes like they're not like in the weeds enough to really know that. And like there's nothing more valuable when you're like in the boiler room and you're just like shining a light on things that'll just make the business better. So I guess that would be my call, a little bit of a call to action for enablement folks. Like if you don't really like have that domain expertise where you know your business as well, if not better than, you know, a random sales manager where you can actually proactively go out there and surface that things, like that's a huge opportunity for you as an enablement professional.
Yeah, I remember you and Tracy were listening to cold call recordings and giving feedback on it. Like you had all of this stuff where it's like, you know what the rep is actually saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's super powerful. So prioritize. That's kind of the first thing that we need to think about. From a training standpoint, I love your take on, training is like, it's really probably the easiest part of this.
It's the most overrated part.
It's the most overrated
Training's
part.
overrated.
So tell us more about that.
Training is overrated. I think where the fail mode is that I think enablement folks, sometimes your sales leaders think that training is the end destination. And once you've delivered the training, magically that information is going to seep into the reps' brains and everything is going to change immediately.
Yeah.
But of course, reality says the exact opposite things happen. If you just do a training, it's called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve or the forgetting curve. I'm sure everyone's seen it. But basically, people only retain 10% of what that training is 24 hours later. Yep. And in all of our and professional lives, we've seen this happen.
Yep.
You do a training, you wait a week, zero result, right? Nothing changes whatsoever. Yep. And I think the end result of that is for people who are optimizing for the training rather than optimizing for the outcome. So if you just flip this whole thing on its head and you say, with kind of going back to prioritization, our number one goal is to change this metric, this behavior, which we think will have an impact on this metric. And I think the secret sauce to that is like, find like the one number.
Yep.
Too often people get lost in like 50 different measures and then nothing really like means anything. Like find like the one proxy measure that's going to say, is this successful or not? And then reverse engineer in your way to actually impacting that. Some of it might be training. Some of it might be dashboarding. Some of it might be going out there and finding exemplars and like, what are like the golden like gong examples that you can share out to everyone else? Like there's so many things, and I'm constantly like pushing the team. Think of all the things that are not training that would actually drive this end result. And how do you have like that constant drumbeat week in, week out after the actual training to make sure that this is top of mind? And I guess the last thing I'll say there is, how are you leveraging frontline managers? Because at the end of the day, all of these initiatives live or die on how well they are bought in and how well they're enabled to actually like carry that water and make that change. And if you put all your focus or 90% of your focus on all of those like long tail activities versus 90% of your focus on the training, you're gonna have such better results. So that's my overall, that's my hot take on training and why it's overrated.
Yeah, I love it. There's so many questions I have. I guess to start with the first one, just best practices around training. A common thing that I will see in enablement orgs is you have the classic, enablement lead teaching reps running a session on cold calling.
Yep.
And they've literally never made a cold call in their entire career. How do you think about the person that is facilitating and running the training and how you partner with sales on that? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah. This is another one of those where if I could go back in time to like early career, I would definitely change my approach on this. Yeah. My general approach to everything you just said is like I'm 1000% agreement. There's no better way or faster way to lose credibility than to be training other people on something that you haven't done. And you haven't done like really, really well. Like if you were like top 10% at cold calling as an SDR and then you moved into enablement and you're like, let me give you my secret sauce, like done. That works for me. If you haven't cold called in 3 years and you're trying to train SDRs who make $75 a day how to cold call, it's like no shot, zero chance.
Yep.
So who should be leading the training? People who are expert at doing the thing. Like I think people obviously want to learn from experts and they want to learn from people who can actually like display expertise. Like let me actually show you how I do this. Like there's nothing in my mind better that a manager can do. Let's talk like SDR manager. Than like doing the job of the rep and absolutely smashing it. Like you will win them over forever. Be like, yes, I want to follow that person. I want to learn from that person. I want to listen to that person.
100%.
Very often that is not the enablement person, right? Like, so you have to pick your presenters really well. Figure out who you're partnering with within sales leadership. We were talking about it. Oftentimes enable people that we want the spotlight. We want to be on stage. We love the like, like that gives you a little bit of like a boost. There's like energy behind that. But oftentimes our job is really to say like, no, we're not the best person to present this. Like,
you're going to be the MC.
Yeah, we're the MC. We're kind of in the background. We're actually figuring out everything I was talking about, all the things that happen after
actually
the training.
Doing the hard stuff, really.
Right. The hard stuff is everything after the training to make sure that stuff sticks. So I do think like that is a key part of the job. The one other thing I'd say is like, what does that incredible SDR sales leader lack when it comes to training? Oftentimes they don't really know the best way to to actually like facilitate adult learning.
Or to teach and just break down like what they do. Like, hey, if you had to pick the 3 steps here for your framework, framework? I don't know. I just kind of do it. That's kind of how most sales reps operate, the good 100%. Ones. They don't even know what makes them really great.
Yeah, it's like, why was Michael Jordan like, a horrible coach? Like he could do it, but he couldn't actually explain how to do it. So I think there's an element of like, how do I make this digestible? So it's like, yes, here's the framework. Let me understand what you do, and then let me turn it into a framework that I can communicate to people. And then the other part is oftentimes people think the way to train is just to like put up slides on a PowerPoint and talk to them for 45 minutes and have everyone just passively sitting there in the room. And, in my opinion, that's obviously like the worst way to go about it. The best way to actually have knowledge retention is to get repetitions, like get people actually doing the thing. So usually I would say like that leader is there for the framework and to model the right behavior. And then the rest of the time, the enablement person can be like, all right, now let's like practice. Like, how do we like facilitate feedback, workshopping, role playing? Like that's the stuff that actually like gets people more comfortable doing it and like actually translating it to the field in my mind.
100%. So I love that piece, optimizing for the outcome. So you sort of alluded to a couple other parts of the framework, and maybe we did this a little bit out of order. We start with prioritize and train. Probably what should have come before that is the measurement and thinking about what you're going to measure first.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. You've said that a couple times, like what is the one metric that we're going to impact? I have a hunch here. Let me know. I'm curious your thoughts. I think that as an enablement team, some enablers might be hesitant to say what is that one metric, because if they don't see positive movement on that metric, they might be worried that it makes them look really bad.
Yeah.
Whereas it sounds like you're going to lean really far into it. Like you want to be on the hook. You want the accountability. Tell us more about like that piece. And then when you say the metric, again, I'm curious, like, what are you bringing to the table in terms of like, are you suggesting something? Are you asking the sales leader? I'm sure it's a combination of the two, but how do you really suggest finding that one metric?
Yeah. Let's start with the first part. It is more uncomfortable. You have more skin in the game if you have the metric, but that's what hopefully people are excited about, is driving impact and not just delivering trainings and getting 5 stars on reviews on your trainings. So if you really want to, like deliver impact back to the business, you got to be someone on the hook. And like, guess what? Here's what I'd tell people to be more comfortable on this. You are not going to bat 1,000. I have rolled out so many programs where we have the metric, we track it on a week over week basis, and you don't have the lift every single time, right?
Yep.
That's part of the thing where you can go back and say, 3-4 weeks later, you don't see the lift. You're like, let's diagnose what's going on here. Like something is broken in our program. Is it like reps don't have the requisite skills or proficiency to go execute it? Is there some other blocker where they're like, they just don't want to do it? Like oftentimes there's that like hidden thing. There's like the organizational inertia where they're like, they don't want to change on this thing. But at least that way you have the basis to have like an actual knowledgeable conversation with your sales stakeholders where you can figure out what to do next. And if you're batting around like 400%, if you're a 400 hitter, you're doing a fantastic job. And you are like driving meaningful impact that you can then go and point back to the business. So I answered the first part, like take the leap, be uncomfortable with that. It is the best way to actually go out there and show value for our function rather than just delivering trainings. The next question is like, well, how do you figure out what that number is? And like the 2 fail modes that I see, the first one by far the most is people just don't have any metric at all. There's no measurement. So like, let's say like that's bad and we don't want to do that.
Well, is that because ops doesn't have a way to measure something? Is it because the data doesn't exist, or is it they just never took the time to begin with?
I think it's more of the latter. It's like we live in a world, I can't speak for every organization, but we are like drowning. I have a dashboard for literally everything, right? So it's like there's no lack of data. There's almost like the unwillingness to go and identify the one thing that would really signal success or failure for a certain initiative. And like, it shouldn't be end revenue. It shouldn't be like, hey, did bookings go up 25% or not? If you're running a program, like let me make it more concrete. We're running a competitive series against a certain competitor where we are tracking our win rates against like this exact competitor.
Yeah.
And we know the trap setting questions they're throwing out against us.
Yep.
We are rolling out our own programs on rolling out trap setting questions against them. And how do we objection handle? And it's like, we're getting people really good when we go head to head, hand to hand combat with this competitor. And we'll just track not only like, are people saying the messaging that we want within Gong, like are they actually doing the behavior? But then you can track your overall win rates against that week over week on a long period of time. You could say, are these improving or not? Which, like in the case of this one, this was a good example where they are. But like, again, that's not going to happen every time. But there's no better way to go back and prove value to the business to say, we ran this program. 4 months later, our win rates against this competitor are up 25%.
Yep.
And it's like there's pretty good attribution there if that's the way you go about handling it.
Yeah, because the attribution thing I think is key, where you're not choosing something very broad. You're also, I don't know if it's necessarily a leading indicator, but you are measuring behavior change, which if calls are being recorded and you're using conversational intelligence, that's something that I don't think should be glossed over, because most of the teams we work with, some of the large teams, there isn't any in-house expertise, nor have they worked with Gong or whoever to set up the trackers.
Yeah.
And it's just like sitting right there, and there's no way for them to tell that there was actual true behavior change leading to the outcome. Because that's also something you would want to know, is like, you can't really take credit for something if the stuff that you trained wasn't adopted.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the Kirkpatrick model of measurement? It's a very enablement, kind of like Dorothy
I have,
thing.
but it's a little rough. Yeah. What is it?
It's basically like 4 levels of measurement. The first is the learner sentiment. Like, did they give it 5 stars? Did they give it 4?
Yeah.
Right. The second is like, can they display the behavior change? Or basically, can they like pass like a quiz? Do they have the knowledge from the thing?
Yeah.
So oftentimes like quizzing knowledge checks is the way to measure that.
Yep.
The third is the behavior change piece, which historically before Gong was the hardest thing to do.
Yep.
It's like you would literally have to go in and like just sample, like sit like knee to knee with person and like listen. Right now with Gong, it's like the biggest gift. I'm a huge Gong proponent. I freaking love Gong. But if you're a chorus person or whatever else, it's the biggest gift to enablement, because you could actually measure behavior change. Like, are people saying the words to customers that you've trained them to say?
Yep.
And then the last, like the pinnacle of the Kirkpatrick metric is the actual like metric.
Yep.
So in this case, it'd be the win rates against X competitor or whatever else.
Yeah.
Where, to your point, where people, I think it's getting better, but like if you are not leveraging Gong to have really clear levels of insight into the behavior change piece, and you have that type of tool, it's like it is such a miss. It's like it is purpose built for that.
Yeah.
And it's just so helpful in getting like signal into all of the things actually changing that you're looking to have them change.
I mean, you might as well just get call recording on the tool that you're using, because you're missing out on the feature that you're paying for.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about prioritization, training, measurement. Let's talk about reinforcement.
Yep.
So I guess broadly speaking, I'm curious how you think about reinforcement, and then also how the frontline managers fit into that. And if we were to backtrack a bit on the frontline managers, I'm wondering, like, when you're rolling out something new, do you typically take the time to train the managers on it and first, and then train the reps? Like, how do you think about the manager reinforcement piece of the equation at Rippling?
Yeah. The way I think about it is the frontline manager is the end customer here, not the sales rep. And that oftentimes is mixed up. But if you just think of it just like in a number standpoint, like one enablement person might be covering 100 sellers. Each manager has like 5. Like, who's going to have a better chance of like long-term like impacting change, right? Just on a numerical standpoint. And then think about who spends more time with the sellers. Like, we might get them for like an hour or 2 a month. They spend 5 hours a day with that group of sellers. The goal is to activate and turn the frontline managers into that force multiplier. Like, they are the end customer of enablement. And if you were just imposing things upon them, this is my bright idea, this is my strategy that you've had zero input on, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. So to your earlier question, they need to be part of the process. Like, this needs to be co-created with management. Now, do you need every single opinion? No, because that'll bog down and like make things impossible to roll out. But everybody could just immediately think of that one manager or 2 managers within the segment who A, holds a lot of weight, and B, has just like fantastic opinions on the way things should be run. And it's like, bring them into the process as you're creating things, turn them like into like, you're building advocacy by doing that. By the way, that's also gonna be the person probably delivering the training as well, because they're creating it. And you'll have so much more credibility rolling it out to the rest of the managers if you're like, yeah, this is working. Like, Phil has done this. It is working for Phil. Here are the results. And he's going to be the one teaching you how to do this, versus kind of this coming top down from enablement, or even kind of that SVP of the org.
Yeah. What strikes me in our conversation is how much you're talking about this through the lens of like, this is how a rep would sell something to a company.
Yeah.
Like you guys are doing internal sales with the team. It's like I would never propose, like when we were first meeting, I would never propose something to you without having done discovery, without talking to, people on your team, without like looking at some of the metrics. Like you would never propose a solution without doing all those things. Yet internally, we sort of operate in a way where we feel like we can just say that we should do things and have no like data backing it, no internal champions that we're working with. Like, that's like really sticks out to me. There's a lot of internal selling.
I love it. I have not. I'm going to start pitching it to the team more like that because I think you're 100% right. And in this case, it's like you are trying to sell without a champion if you don't have frontline management on. And we would never let our sellers sell a big deal without really strong champions that you've tested, that are along for the ride, that have a stake in the game. And it's like, of course, like you need these people involved. So it's a little bit of a no-brainer, but oftentimes, I don't want to say like enablement is just like stepping on the rake and like they're like foolish for this. What happens is like enablement so much is like oftentimes like caught into the like swirls of the business where it's like new priority coming from here, new priority coming from there. And you are completely like, you just get lost in all the noise of what's happening with an organization that oftentimes we're like, we just need to ship shit. Like, let's just get stuff out the door. But anytime you're in that, it's like, look, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm sure I'm doing this today, probably in a meeting happening later. This happens from time to time, but you need the like intentionality. You need the course correcting, being like, this is not the way that we're going to drive actual impact, and like really start thinking back from first principles in terms of how to do that.
Yeah, love it, man. Can you give me, before we move on, with frontline managers, is there, when you say metrics, so let's say that we're trying to affect the win rate on competitive deals with this specific competitor. Is there a metric given to the managers in terms of, for example, you now should be coaching, we're expecting you and Gong to go in and coach or listen to 3 calls per week. And then flag it. Like how do you, what's the accountability and 100%. Measurement and all of that kind of stuff look like with the managers?
So one of the like guiding leadership principles at Rippling, the one that I take most art, is go and see, which basically says like, if there's ever any problem in the business, like you need to bring that problem all the way to ground. Like you need to get into the boiler room and understand the day-to-day mechanics. And this is something that's like exemplified all the way up to our CEO. If like something's going wrong, like he'll be listening to Gong calls, like
that, dude.
Like to understand the problem. And I think that's kind of permeated throughout the entire organization. So like 1000% yes. If your sales managers aren't living on Gong, listening to calls, or at least like riding shotgun on those calls with their sales reps, taking an active role in those calls, you're going to be a little bit lost, right? Like, how do you know if the desired golden path, the playbook that you've rolled out, the best practices that you think are going to lead to just like codified, scaled, like actual like results are actually taking place? Like you need that level of inspection. So I think naturally that happens at Rippling. I think we're fortunate, almost from a cultural standpoint, that it's kind of been like beaten into our heads literally since day one of working there, that everybody does this. Another thing that we're experimenting with not to plug Gong again, but one of the things they have.
Not sponsored, by the way.
I know, yeah, seriously. Hook up something. How about a T-shirt, Gong? But they just rolled out a feature where you could basically have AI score all the calls. All right, and so when we first rolled this out, I was like too excited about it. We rolled it out, and then all the managers were like, "Yeah, this is like typical AI, like way over the top, like overly complimentary, like disaster calls, or like amazing job, like everything was like puppies and like lollipops for reps." But we found once you actually calibrate it, you like get managers scoring it, go back and you're like, AI, like you're dead wrong. Like this is why this is a 2 out of 5. You could actually get it into a pretty good spot. And the way we're using that now is like, we just use it to identify like the spikiness at either end of the spectrum. We wanted to identify like the fantastic calls, the 5 out of 5s, the one where like, we should put this into our like golden like call library. And then more so too on like, this is like a 1.5 out of 5. And like manager, like you need to actually take action on this. Like alert, like you got a Slack message, your rep just had a 2 out of 5 call. Like you should listen to it, and there might be a coaching conversation there. And again, it doesn't like abdicate the manager's responsibility to do that 2 calls a week, but ideally it makes it a bit more intelligent about like what they're actually reviewing there.
It's like instead of spending all of your time looking through the calls to coach, I can spend my time coaching.
Yeah.
That's really with AI. And this is the last thing I would ask you about on the framework. The last piece is practice. I really want your take on these like AI coaches and that sort of stuff, because the big thing I'm really worried about is there's the solution I feel like is fixing the wrong problem. The problem is that managers aren't spending more time coaching. And I think there's a whole host of reasons why that might happen, especially when a company grows really large. There's a lot of internal meetings and things like that. But I'm like, God, as a manager, if you're not spending at least a third of your time, up to a half of your time, like coaching, if you're an AE manager, riding shotgun on sales calls, helping work deals, what are you doing? And I'm really worried that the whole AI coaching thing is going to replace, or Salesforce think it's going to replace at least, like getting coaching from your manager. So how do you think about practice, and like what's your hot take on AI coaching and all of that stuff?
This is interesting and might be somewhat contradictory. So the underlying principle is that I think the only way to get better at anything as an adult is by like constant repetition and practicing, right? Like you have to go to the driving range, you have to hit like hundreds and hundreds of buckets of balls to get like fractionally better. Same thing on sales. Like you need the repetitions. So I'm a true believer that that's the right way. To your point, I think there's a great opportunity for AI level coaching, but there's the huge pitfall of if this like somehow abdicates the manager's responsibility to do it, it's like you are guaranteed to have this like be an utter failure. The other thing I'd say is like I have piloted, I think every single, because I'm such a believer in practice, like I have run deep like POCs with every single one of these companies. And I did this probably like too early in the cycle, like just when they were coming out, like we just got out of like Y Combinator, like come like run a POC, and like probably like too early stage. But the one thing I found was that like reps quickly learned how to like game the AI to get the right result, but not necessarily like actually improving their skills. So like if you do the call like 10 times, like we do it a ton for cold calling.
Yeah.
We saw like reps getting 5 out of 5 scores, and we'd ask them like, how did you get there? And like, I just noticed like I would get a better score on this if I like did it this way, but it wasn't always actually translating to like better cold calling practice. So they're kind of like, it was like cheat codes to the video game rather than like actual true repetition. Now, again, like I don't want to slander this. I actually do think there's incredible potential for this, but like the reason we didn't onboard one of these, let's say like 12 months ago when we were doing all these pilots, was because that's what we were finding. It was more on like, how do you actually get to like, how do you get to the end level of the game versus like really practicing and getting better at skills. I'm sure I'm going to get like a million cold calls from Udly and Hyperbound and all those folks. Not saying we've made it much better, which by the way, please do call me. Like I like, if it actually does work, I do want to implement something like that. Yeah. But I hadn't seen that so far in the POCs. And if that leads to managers not doing it, then like I'm out like 100% anyway.
So where does practice then fit in right now without that stuff?
Yeah, it's just it's old school. It's like managers, 2 calls a week. You have 2 one-on-ones with your rep. One's more deal focused. One's more coaching focused.
Got it.
Like, let's actually like sit and review this call together. Let's role play it live in the moment. It's like, does this happen on every, like we have hundreds of managers at Rippling now. Does every manager do the exact same? Like I wish, but they don't. But our absolute best managers, 100% are having dedicated coaching time for every single rep every week based on the gong calls. And that's really what we're trying to scale out without kind of like the scaled AI model.
Love it. All right. So we got a couple more minutes left. Let's shift gears a bit. I'm curious, before we get into the rapid fire questions.
Yep.
You guys have a pretty large enablement team.
Yeah.
So if you were to take us back to the times when you had a really small team, or maybe it was just you kind of doing stuff, like what advice do you have for smaller enablement teams that have maybe similar demands being asked of them, but they don't have the staff to have a program manager for each segment? What was that like back in the day for you? And like, what advice would you have for enablement teams now to get, not to be cliche, but get more done with, less?
More done with less. I mean, I'll tell a little bit of like, my story here. And again, this is like with the caveat, like this is what I've seen work for me, but it doesn't scale, it might not be applicable to every single org. But my general take on this is that, you are going to get better results specializing and developing like deep domain expertise amongst your enablement PMs rather than having like really like broad or horizontal structures.
Yeah.
So I think the structure that I like probably dislike the most, if I had to call out any, is like an enablement setup where you'll have like instructional designers, like people who like build training or learning, sitting in the background, and then you'll have trainers who just are handed like packets of training and then they deliver that.
It's so theoretical. It is just like the worst.
It's like guaranteed recipe for sellers to be like just complete hostages in that training. Like, why am I here counting down the clock? Like there's almost no chance of success in my mind if you're doing that. I would put that more akin to the like anti like sexual harassment or like anti money laundering training that I'm like required to do twice a year. Like that's what that type of training reminds me of. So it's like how do
important but boring.
Yes, sorry, not of course important, but not necessarily what enablement is hired to do like compliance level training, right? So how do you get away from the compliance training that sellers say they get no value out of the 45 minutes or hour they're there? You have to develop deep domain expertise. And I personally think even if you have a small team, if you can start carving out folks where you're like, you are the AE person.
Yeah.
You know, we're covering a team of, 100 sellers out there. There's 50 AEs. And I have a person who's somewhat like much more accountable and feel they have skin in the game and needs to get really, really smart on the dynamics of the AE motion.
Yeah.
And who ideally is being proactive and partnering with whoever the sales leaders are there. I think you're going to be so much better off in delivering value back to the business. And then it's like, guess what? As the team grows, you're going to be in a much better position to justify more investment in enablement when that VP of AE now is taking over 2 or 3 teams and they're saying to the CRO or the CFO, like, hey, I need more enablement help. My one person who's delivering a ton of value is stretched way too thin. Like we need person number 2. The way to get more resourcing is to have those internal advocates saying like, we need more. And the way to do that is to deliver kind of like deep integral value to the business, not to be like highly theoretical, philosophical. Let me pull you into a classroom once a month.
Love that. Specialization has been another theme from the conversation today. So specialize. All right, dude, I got like 3 or 4 rapid fire questions for you.
Let's do it.
You ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
I'm curious, how do you prevent and deal with stress, anxiety, all of that kind of stuff that's associated with, running a department, being an executive, all of that stuff?
Yeah. It's a great question. Like Rippling like runs hard. Like anyone who you would talk to who has worked at Rippling, they're like, yes, the treadmill is going at like 30 miles an hour. And people like I'm sucking wind from time to time. So it is a super important question. I think part of this, naturally, I am very like even-tempered, mild-mannered. I think everyone on my team be like, Jonas, like show more emotion. Like what's going on? So like, I think naturally I'm a little bit of like a calm personality, but at the same point, there are like some secrets to making sure that happens in stressful situations. One, I always tell everyone on my team, like, just assume positive intent from pretty much everyone you work with.
I like that.
So oftentimes people are like, oh, like the sniping, the politicking, it happens because people just like invent things. So they don't give people the grace of like, other people are stressed as well. Like shit can be crazy sometimes. So like just assume positive intent, give people the leeway, and then like obviously make sure that you're taking some time. Like we'll just block off time that is just like no-go zones. Like I will not look at Slack. I'll do family time. I do drop off in the mornings.
So you put that on your calendar so your team knows not to.
I will not respond between the hours of like 8 and 9 because I'm doing getting the kids off to school and walking the dogs. And usually like 6:30 to like 8 is like family time. I'm doing dinner, hanging out with the kids. I'm making sure they do their homework, whatever else that may be. And like there is some times where it's just like Slack is not an option. And then there's other times where it's like, you're like deep in it. But I do think there needs to be like that element where you're kind of like, you're blocking off zones that are just like non-work time. And that's kind of non-negotiable.
Boundaries. Love it.
Yeah.
How do you think about work-life balance? Is that a thing?
I'm on the camp of like, I think it's a bit of a myth. If you are working in a company that has like 1% of 1% aspirations, like if you were trying to do something that 99.9% of other companies have failed to do, then like it is not going to be easy by definition. And I think the key part is just finding the right people who actually want to be along for that ride. Like there's other businesses out there that I've worked at that are a lot more relaxed, a lot more chilled. Like I think there's different times in your career where you should just know kind of like the type of work mode that you need to be in. Like there's been times where like maybe like just as my kids were born, where I was like, yeah, like I can't be like not like just running on the treadmill at 30 miles an hour 6 days a week.
Yeah.
There's other times where like, yeah, I want to grind and like really be part of something special that's going to be some sort of outsized kind of like one-of-one outcome.
Yep.
And it's like, I think that's going to be hard. I think it's going to be really hard. And like, yeah, work-life balance, I think, does suffer to an extent as a result of that. But you have to kind of know going into it what you're in for.
Good advice. What's a lesson that you've learned from one of your leaders that you still use today?
I'd say a lesson that I've learned, and this is kind of a rippling thing. I talked a little bit about it before, but like a lot of times I've seen leadership mistaken as like, all right, you now fully sit back and now everyone else does everything. And you're just the puppet master kind of not working anymore. You're just
sounds nice.
You're managing. And it's like, no, like guess what? The most high leverage things like you are doing, like you are actually getting your hands dirty. You are doing a lot of the work. And like it kind of goes back to what I was saying before of like who should be doing the training. People who are excellent at it, like people who have like deep domain expertise. If you have a really high leverage program that's going to be like the one thing on the whole year, it's like, why isn't your head of sales enablement legit like running huge pieces of that program?
Yes.
So I guess one of the leadership principles is like, yeah, you actually have to do the thing. Like always, no matter how high up you get, you should always be doing the end work and doing it on the kind of like the highest leverage areas.
Love it. So before you take off, where can people go to connect with you, learn more about Rippling? You said that you're hiring right now.
Yes, we are hiring. Please look at Rippling Careers. We have enablement roles posted, and we are constantly hiring. We're going to be hiring a lot more about like 8 months from now when we do our annual planning for 2027. Please contact me and connect on LinkedIn. I love kind of being part of the Enablement Network. I love hearing what other people are doing. LinkedIn's best. I'm not huge on social anywhere else, so we'll keep it professional there.